All right. Well, I'll just wait a second and let people join in, and we'll get started. Let me see here. See if the live is kicking in there. Okay. And I think we have folks joining in, so let's begin. Okay, so as the great Gomez Adams said, here's to the glorious mysteries of life. I have a really cool mystery that I'm going to show you today, and I'll get to that in just a little bit. But the first thing I want to do is I want to show you this artifact and see if you can tell me a couple of this. Okay, let me show you this right here. And hi, James, Catherine, and Kristen. Okay, so here's an artifact right here. See if you can tell me not only what this is, but why is it lined with tin? Okay, see, it's lined with tin in there. And obviously this is copper. Okay, so remember this, and at the end you could maybe tell me what this is and why it is lined with tin. Okay, now on to our mystery. Okay, so right now we're going to we're going to don our Sherlock Holmes hats. So let me show you this artifact. This is really, really cool, and we're going to talk about it. Okay. All right, so let me show you this right here. There it is. Okay. What is this? What's going on? All right, so this is, come with me on this journey. This is a really interesting mystery journey here. This is a Flintlock pistol. It's one of two, so it's a brace of pistols. It's two pistols that belonged to James Monroe. It was passed down through the family, okay? You see the flintlock here? Let's just go through a couple of the nuts and bolts. Oh, hey, Carol, how are you? Oh, wow, all the way from PA. Very cool. Let's just go over a couple of the nuts and bolts of this, okay, here. So this right here is the pan. Okay, that's called the pan. This is the frizzen right up here. That's called the frizzen. This is the hammer, this right here. And this is the jaws, right? These are the jaws that hold the flintlock. And just really quick, the way that this works is there would be a piece of flint in here, okay? Hence the name flintlock. And then you put it into the jaws, and then you have the hammer screw, or that goes down here, and it locks it down into here. And the gunpowder would go right through here, and there's actually a hole that goes into the barrel, if you could see that. Okay, so it goes right into the barrel, and the gunpowder would be loaded on here, and I'm not going to put it back, but the frizzen here would be pushed back onto and covering the gunpowder on the pan. And then the hammer would come back. Oh, and there's the hammer lock. You can see the spring there. So the hammer would come back like this, and it would get, here's the frizzen spring over here, by the way. You can see that. And then upon point of the trigger, this would just pop down there, and what it would do is it would light off the powder that's in there, set an explosion of sorts into the barrel, and then the barrel would light off and go in here. Okay, so that's all well and good, but what's the deal with this thing? What is this? Okay, like I said, it's one of a pair of pistols. And it was handed down through the Monroe family. So the founding director, Lawrence Hughes, okay, he was a direct descendant of James Monroe, all right? And according to him, in a 1962 letter, Lawrence wrote that according to family tradition, you hear that a lot in museums, according to family tradition, and oh, hi, Mike, hi, Alan, hi, Brett. According to family tradition, this was, belonged to James Monroe, and it was made from some special, it's iron and iron, and it's made from some special and unusual ore. Okay, think about that. All right, so remember that. It's made for some special and unusual ore. And that was part of the family tradition as it was passed down through the family. Okay, so here's where the story takes an interesting turn, okay? In the summer of 1962, Lawrence, he received a phone call from the National Archives, okay? So the National Archives called him up and he said, well, they were informing him there was an 1816 presentation of pistols to President James Madison by General Ignacio Alvarez, who he was the supreme director of the United Provinces of Rio del Plata, which, as you know, turned out to be Argentina. Okay, so Okay, so the archives calls Lawrence Hughes and says, "Hey, we had this note about a presentation of pistols given to James Madison, not James Monroe, but given to James Madison by the Supreme Director of the United Provinces of Rio de la Plata, which later turned out to be Argentina." Now, the pistols described in the presentation that was originally given to James Madison, they were from the first essays of a manufacturer of arms in, I'll hold this up a little bit, in Buenos Aires. It was a fledgling town back then, Buenos Aires. It wasn't as big as it is now. And it was from a large meteoric deposit called Campo de Celio. Okay? So, a large meteoric deposit. So think about that. Okay, so according to family tradition, they were saying that this presentation or these pair of pistols that belonged to James Monroe had a strange and unusual ore. Well, a large meteoric deposit, which and by the way, meteor, they would be iron, and that's where they would get a bunch of iron from. I think that would certainly qualify. So, the logical conclusion was that these pistols were presented to James Monroe by James Madison, and they were made from a meteoric deposit. They had meteor iron in them. That's pretty cool, right? And it seems like a logical conclusion, does it not? So here's the thing, though, and here's where the plot thickens. As Sherlock Holmes would say, the game's afoot. So in 2006, okay, this is decades later, 2006. So for decades, they just assumed that was what was going on. So a decade later, they send this off up to Oxfordshire, England, and have it tested, okay? They have it tested, and it comes back negative. So it comes back that it's not meteoric iron. And not only that, but you see this inlay, okay? I'm going to hold this up. This inlay all along here that they thought was silver inlay is actually nickel silver. So it's not meteoric iron, and it's not silver, it's nickel silver. So the mystery is, were they given to James Monroe by James Madison or not? There's a couple really interesting scenarios that pop up on there, okay? It's very possible that these were indeed the pistols that were given to James Madison, and they were made in the manufacture of arms in Buenos Aires. They just simply weren't made from the meteoric iron. I mean, they could have had some other iron there. So it's possible that they were first made there. Maybe. But another thing is why would the Supreme Director give to a sitting president a pair of pistols that wasn't actually silver inlay, but it was actually nickel silver? We don't know. So that's kind of a mystery, isn't it? And the bottom line is, do we know for a fact that this was given to James Madison and then given to James Monroe? Oh, and the other factor of this, but the catch in all this is, why would family tradition state that this is made from a special ore? I mean, what did Sean Connery say to Kevin Costner in The Untouchables? He said, "Who would claim to be that which wasn't?" That's a very specific thing to say. So the bottom line is, we don't know. And my mom tells a story about my grandfather when they were asking him, "You're older now. What is life all about?" And he said, "I don't know. And isn't that wonderful?" I love that. Anyway, we just don't know. One thing we do know, there's several things we do know for the fact that this very likely did belong to James Monroe. It was passed directly down through the family, all those years. So, but whether these are the pistols that were described to James Madison and given to him, we don't know. But regardless, this is an amazing piece. I mean, look at this. Look at this thing. Look at this inlay that goes along here. Do you know how they do inlay? Do you know how they do silver wire inlay? What they do is they cut into little tiny precision cuts into the wood, right? They cut along, look at that. They cut all along in there. Each one of these patterns was a tiny little cut. And then they take the wire and they gently tap it. They tap it down into the wood, and it actually holds the wood. And a lot of the master craftsmen, they'll actually cut, when they do the cut, here, let me put this down for a second. Sorry, I'm nerding out a little bit. If they have the wood, they'll actually cut down into the wood, and they'll make it at an angle like this on each side. So little tiny wires at an angle on each side. So when they tamp it in, the silver flattens out, and it actually goes underneath, and then it stays in place more, and then they sand it out. So Each one of these is a little tiny cut that's inside the wood. So it's a pretty magnificent inlay. I mean, it really is. And look at the etching on there. See the etching? See the etching on the barrel? Beautiful patterns, right? And you know how they do etching? All right, let me nerd out again. Okay, so with etching, what they do is they'll put some kind of boundary material, wax, something like that, onto the surface of the metal, and they'll just coat it over there, right? And then they'll remove the surface, wherever they want the etching. If you want to do a flower, they would put the pattern in there, like a pattern of a flower, and they would expose that metal, and then they'd put the acid on top of that. So they expose the metal. Okay, Carl, yeah, that's true. There's always a little truth in every bit of legend. So once they put the acid on there, the metal is exposed and it etches in. So you have a little tiny etch, and it makes a little bit of difference with the metal before it. And then they remove the wax, or whatever material they're using. So that's an incredible piece. So regardless of one way or another, it's an incredible piece. This is part of a dual. This is part of a pair. They call them a brace of pistols. Whether it was actually used as a dueling pair, a little bit questionable. They're a little bit short. The barrel's a little bit short for that sort of thing. The other thing is that these could have been given to James Monroe, and these were, inlaid and done after the fact, maybe. So I don't know. I mean, I would love to hear from you, and you'll send me an email and let me know what you think of that sort of interesting mystery of where this comes from. Again, a one of a two pair of pistols that was given to James Monroe, made out of flintlock. Okay. So now the second thing that I was talking about before, did anyone kind of think of what this is and why this would have been made, why the inside of this would have been lined with tin? Oh man, you say amazing. There's anyone talks. Oh yeah, the technique. Yeah, I could talk about that later. So what is this, and why is this inlaid, or why is this lined with tin? Well, so back in the 30s, Mrs. Hoover, Lou Hoover, President Hoover's wife, First Lady of the United States, came and visited the museum. Okay, so she came and visited the museum. She was so intrigued by the furniture that we have here. We have some neoclassical furniture here, which I'll show in another chat, and it's absolutely spectacular. Wait till you see this. But anyway, she came in and she visited, and she liked the furniture so much that she actually she worked with the museum to make replicas of that furniture that we have to put in the White House. And she, as a sort of a gift, one of the gifts that she gave in return was this measuring cup, which according to family tradition, again, you hear that word, according to family tradition, this was used by James Monroe in the White House. Whether that's true or not, we don't know. It is, period appropriate. It's about 1820, somewhere in there. And it is a measure, and this is a full quart. So this is a measuring cup. So this is a giant measuring cup. I bet a lot of you still have measuring cups that sort of kind of look like this. So the problem is, why is it lined with lead? Well, that copper stuff, whenever copper turns green, it's called vidigerous. I'm not pronouncing it correctly, but vidigerous. If that's pronounced correctly, probably not. But there's a name for that when it turns green. So, the inside of it turns green. Well, that stuff can be poisonous. So you'd want to line this with lead line it with tin. Lead would be even worse. Line it with tin to prevent that from happening. So it's kind of interesting, if you go all the way back, measuring cups, they really haven't changed a whole lot, right? Look at that. It looks like a measuring cup you might find at, some store today. So it's kind of interesting. See these rivets? You know how they do that? So this tells you that this was not, so let me show you this. So this tells you that this is not a cast copper piece, okay? How do I know that? Well, if a lot of things today, measures in today, they'll be cast out of copper, right? Just one piece and it was just all poured in. Well, this is not. If you look really closely, can you see those little tiny bumps on there as I turn it? Can you see that? There's little tiny bumps on there. That's from the peening. That's from the peening where the smith was shaping the copper. He was actually shaping the cup into the shape that it is. And so it's not smooth out. And then on the back here, can you see these? These are rivets, right? how does the rivet work? If you look on the inside, you can see the inside of the rivet. Well, the rivet is pretty much, probably most of you, I'm probably preaching to the choir here, but the rivets are pretty easy to do. You take the piece of metal or whatever it is you're putting in between the two pieces. Say you have a piece, you have the handle, you want to put it onto the cup, right? And you put it right here, and then the rivet goes in between the two, and then you just tap it and smash it in, and that's why you see it's sort of flat on the inside. You see that it's kind of flat. So that's why that's there like that. It's kind of flat with there. And so that's how rivets work. But yeah, so this was shaped by a smith. This wasn't cast, and that's kind of an old school technique, right? All right, so that's pretty cool. So I don't know. What do you think of that mystery? Let me review real quick. You have a brace of pistols that was possibly given to James Monroe by James Madison. They claimed it was meteoric iron in the pistols that were given to James Madison, and when they tested this, though, however, it turned out not to be meteoric iron. But it is an intriguing mystery. So anyway, oh, and let me show you a close up of the lock here, if you can see that. See the frizz in there? A lot of the lock. A lot of people are interested in that and how that works. The immediate sort of descendant of this is the percussion cap. So the percussion cap pistol, if you can imagine, it would just be on the end here would just be a hammer that would go in, and they would put a percussion cap that had a little bit of an explosive chemical on the inside, and they would put it on the tip. There would be a little tiny, well, they call it a nipple. It would be on there. And then when the hammer comes down, it would smash into the percussion cap, and that would be what would fire and into the gunpowder of the barrel. They would still be loading it through the barrel, through the top of the barrel. Something else that's sort of interesting is that these old guns, you have to check them because sometimes they still have gunpowder in them. So if you have an old pistol or an old rifle or something that that was muzzle loaded, you might want to check it because gunpowder is kind of like wine; it just gets better with age. Gunpowder will last; it'll become volatile. So that's why a lot of those old bombs that they find, they're still active because the gunpowder is not degrading; it still can be explosive. So you have to watch out for that. This does not, unfortunately. So if that's some good advice for you at home, if you do have a pistol or an old flintlock or anything like that, make sure you check it very carefully. I'll have a professional check it and make sure that it doesn't actually still have gunpowder inside because it could light off. So anyway, there's that. Oh, this is kind of something else that's kind of cool. If you see how this is sort of sit on top of there, they would make this handle that would come up here. Usually it would be walnut, something like that, usually a darker wood. And then they would sit and they would roll the barrel on the inside. You know how they would do the barrel sometimes? Sometimes they would twist the metal so that, it would have bars of iron that would go through, and they would twist it into a shape, and then they would, forge weld it and everything and go into shape and then drill down in. And so that's why in some of those old barrels, you see there's sort of a twist pattern that comes in. So that's kind of interesting. And then one more time, here's the court measure that was given to the museum by Lou Hoover, by First Lady Mrs. Hoover back in the day. And she gave it as a thank you to the museum for helping her out with the furniture. And in the next Curator chat, I'll show you some of that furniture, and it's really, really cool. You're going to love it. So anyway, thank you so much for tuning in, for joining me. I really appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun. As I said, if you want to, email me any time. It's all on there, and we have a lot of good content on our Facebook page. Also, on our website, if you want to become a member of the museum, there's a lot of great things that you can do. There's a lot of good benefits for the membership if you want to become a member of the museum. It can help us out a little bit, maybe, if you want to become a member. So you can go to the website, and there's ways that you can do that there. But anyway, in our Facebook page, give it a like, get a share if you can. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate all the support you all have been giving and all these wonderful questions that you have, and all these wonderful sort of insights. And thank you for being a fellow history nerd. I appreciate it. I will see you next time. Thank you so much. All right, bye.